In Only Time Will Tell, Jeffrey Archer unrolls the first chapter in the life of Harry Clifton, a boy born in the shadow of the Bristol docks in the 1920s, where every whistle of a departing ship seems to echo with promises or warnings. From the very beginning, the story hums with the pulse of change, like a tide gathering momentum beneath the surface. We meet Harry not as a hero, but as a boy with questions. Chief among them, what really happened to his father? Archer doesn't rush with the answer. Instead, he layers the narrative through the voices of those around Harry. His tireless mother Maisie, whose sacrifices quietly stitched together their future. Old Jack Tar, the war-worn recluse whose mentorship gives Harry more than just guidance. And the Barrington family, whose fortune and secrets are tightly moored to the docks where Harry's fate was cast long before he was born. These shifting perspectives are not just storytelling devices. They subtly challenge us to consider the blurry boundaries between truth, perception, and legacy. As Harry grows from a curious boy into a scholar with a voice that earns him a place at an elite school, the world around him begins to stretch. The tone shifts. What began as a working-class tale quietly folds into something grander, heavier. There is the slow seep of privilege and the tremors of World War II edging into the narrative. And yet, the emotions never fray. Archer's strength lies in how he maintains an intimate human scale, even as his characters are swept into conflicts far larger than themselves. It's not long before ambition and love complicate Harry's path. His bond with Emma Barrington, daughter of the shipping magnate, is tender and inevitable, like two stars pulled toward one another. But love, in this world, comes shackled to class, to secrets, and to the cruel machinery of pride. The choices made by those in power ripple outward, often unseen, and the past rarely stays buried. In these moments, the novel brushes up against a quiet but potent realism, that what determines a man's future isn't just what he knows, but what others believe about him. Characters in Only Time Will Tell are rarely cast as purely noble or wholly cruel. Even Hugo Barrington, whose actions rattle Harry's world, is rendered with just enough interior shadow that we sense how fear and resentment can twist a person's path. The pacing, meanwhile, shifts like the English weather, bright and hopeful at times, then suddenly overcast. This rhythm isn't accidental. It mirrors the emotional pacing of growing up, where revelations land not with a bang, but with the slow dawning of understanding. By the time the story bends toward its final pages, and the courtroom replaces the classroom, readers are left with a lingering question. Not just about Harry's future, but about how far someone can outrun the truths that others try to bury. Archer closes the first volume not with resolution, but with a door left slightly ajar. And it's that invitation, to walk through it and see what waits on the other side, that makes this more than just a family saga. It becomes a mirror held up to inheritance, to ambition, and to the question that haunts us all. The tide that swept Harry Clifton out of the Bristol docks now crashes against the jagged shores of identity. The novel opens not with answers, but with an unraveling, a courtroom in New York, a new name, and a question that hovers like fog. Who is Harry Clifton really? And more pressingly, who is he allowed to be? The narrative picks up precisely where Only Time Will Tell left us, but the world has changed. War is no longer distant thunder, it's the rhythm of everyday life, and while bullets fly overseas, a quieter war is being fought in legal chambers and drawing rooms, over titles, inheritances, and truths that no one quite dares to speak aloud. Once again, Archer weaves his story through multiple viewpoints, and here, this technique becomes even more poignant. It's not just about seeing events from different angles, it's about how each character clings to their version of justice, of duty, of family. Maisie Clifton, ever the quiet force, continues her ascent from waitress to businesswoman with a grit that doesn't ask for applause. Her rise feels earned, not gifted, and her love for Harry remains the one constant in a world determined to bend him. Emma Barrington, too, emerges not as an ornament of the plot, but as its backbone. Where some characters yield under the weight of legacy, Emma steadies herself. Her journey, through betrayal, heartbreak, and motherhood, is rendered with such care that we begin to see the story's center subtly shift toward her. Her choices aren't flashy, but they matter. She is no longer simply Harry's beloved. She is a woman who chooses to stand still when the world tells her to move on. At the core of the novel lies a delicate tangle of names and claims. The question of Harry's paternity becomes more than legal, it becomes moral. Can truth be rewritten with signatures and oaths? Or does it live in the marrow of who we are, regardless of what courts decide? The tone throughout is taut, almost suffocating at times, as if every character is walking a hallway lined with locked doors. And yet, in the middle of this tension, Archer finds room for warmth, especially in the letters exchanged across the Atlantic. Silent lifelines stitched into the structure like emotional undercurrents. Giles Barrington, Harry's friend turned brother-in-law, faces his own reckoning, not just on the battlefield, but with the question of what he's willing to lose in order to be loyal. His chapters echo the novel's deeper questions about legacy, not the kind written in wills, but the kind etched into memory. What will we be remembered for? What will be passed on when we are gone? As the plot unfurls, it begins to ask less about who will inherit the Barrington fortune and more about who deserves to shape its future. The realism here is not gritty in the modern sense. It lies in the restraint. Characters don't always get what they want. Justice is slow. Secrets don't combust, they erode. The emotional pacing leans into this realism with grace. Triumphs are muted, and grief doesn't announce itself. It settles in quietly. And yet, Archer knows when to strike. By the novel's final act, we find ourselves once more in a courtroom, this time in England, and it is not a verdict on Harry, but on Giles. And still, the larger question persists. How much of our life do we own, and how much do we inherit, unknowingly, from those who walked before us? The sins of the father doesn't close doors, it rearranges the furniture, shifts the light, and leaves us standing in the threshold of what comes next. In Archer's hands, legacy is never just a matter of blood, but of courage, timing, and the slow, patient unspooling of truth. Best kept secret opens not with relief, but with hesitation. The question of who will inherit the Barrington title, so long deferred, finally receives an answer, but the moment doesn't land with triumph. Instead, it feels like crossing a finish line, only to find another race already waiting. Giles Barrington's victory is formalized, but the cost lingers in the air. And so, Archer's story continues. Less a linear climb, more a labyrinth, where each resolution turns inward, revealing new corners of ambition, rivalry, and doubt. Harry Clifton, now a published novelist, steps more fully into the public eye, but he remains a man watching the world for signs of safety, of belonging, of whether the past has truly let go. The publishing world suits him, not because it is easy, but because it lets him turn life's confusion into stories. His quiet persistence, his moral compass, make him the kind of character who rarely makes headlines but always earns loyalty. Yet even as his career gains momentum, a familiar shadow returns. Hugo Barrington's ghost, present not in flesh, but in the chaos left behind. Emma, too, faces a new kind of storm. Now a mother, a businesswoman, and a quiet anchor in the ever-evolving Barrington empire, she begins to see how much of the family's survival depends not on old money, but on steady minds. The choices she makes, especially concerning Sebastian, her and Harry's son, carry the novel's emotional weight. Her intelligence never shouts, but the way she navigates boardrooms, betrayal, and motherhood reveals a strength that is quiet, grounded, and constant. And it is Sebastian, young and sharp, who pulls the narrative forward like a thread drawn tight. Still a boy, but already sizing up the world around him, he watches, listens, calculates. The Clifton Barrington legacy begins to settle on his shoulders, and Archer sketches his development with an almost invisible hand. Sebastian doesn't rush into the spotlight. He grows into it. His instincts are good, but his youth leaves room for missteps. His future, like the family's, is beginning to take shape, but only in outline. Meanwhile, the Barrington Shipping Company, that ever-present backdrop of the saga, becomes more than just a business. It becomes a battlefield. Giles and Emma face boardroom politics sharpened into weapons, with new characters like Alex Fisher returning with old grudges disguised as new agendas. The stakes are financial, yes, but always personal. Archer has a way of turning company votes and shareholder meetings into scenes of high drama, where what's at risk is not just profit, but pride, family, and identity. The tone of the novel becomes more intricate here, neither brooding nor light, but layered, as if adulthood has settled fully across the cast. There's less wonder, more calculation. The emotional pacing follows suit. Triumphs are harder earned, and the fallout of poor decisions hangs longer in the air. What makes it feel real is that these moments are not overstated. A failed exam, a foolish trust, a quiet betrayal. These events don't explode, they echo. And yet, despite the tensions, there is forward motion. Giles, now an MP, begins his foray into politics, not as a master manipulator, but as a man trying to do right by his country, while still battling the weight of family expectations. His storyline, surprisingly tender at moments, shows us the quieter costs of ambition. How much must be given up? How much must remain unsaid? Through it all, Archer remains focused on the interplay between character and choice. No one is defined by a single event. Instead, we watch as each decision, each withheld truth, each offered chance, slowly accumulates. A missed opportunity in youth returns as a burden in adulthood. A kindness given early ripens into loyalty when least expected. Best kept secret ends not with answers, but with rising stakes. As Sebastian's future begins to collide with his family's past, the sense is clear. The legacy is no longer just something inherited. It is something built, brick by brick, moment by moment. And as Archer lowers the curtain on this chapter, one truth becomes unmistakable. While the sins of the fathers may linger, it is the hopes of the sons that will Mightier Than the Sword opens not with thunder, but with a question of intent. The Barrington Shipping Company, having survived sabotage and scandal, is now sailing toward expansion, prestige, and visibility. But increased light casts longer shadows. Archer begins to tighten the screws, not with explosions, but with careful reveals, layered loyalties, and the slow ticking of threats hidden in plain sight. Harry Clifton, now president of Penn International, has become more than a writer. He is a quiet advocate, a man of letters who has come to understand that the pen he wields can shape policy, free prisoners, and shake regimes. His journey from dockside child to international figurehead might seem improbable if Archer hadn't charted it so gradually, so humanly. But what defines Harry now is not success, it's responsibility. To speak for those who cannot, to expose what others prefer buried. And as he champions Anatoly Babakov, a Soviet writer imprisoned for daring to speak the truth, Harry reveals how personal integrity can become its own kind of warfare. Emma Clifton, still guiding Barrington Shipping with composure and foresight, faces storms not from the sea, but from within the boardroom. As chairman, she is both a shield and target. The company's proposed expansion to New York, a move ripe with promise, is threatened not by poor planning, but by invisible hands working against her. Her clarity in crisis, her unyielding grip on what's right for the company, make her not just a matriarch, but a tactician. And yet, Emma is never cold. Her strength lies not in domination, but in the ability to listen, to trust, and, when necessary, to act before others realize action is needed. Giles Barrington, meanwhile, continues his rise in politics, but finds that influence rarely comes without compromise. His integrity, which once served as compass, now threatens to become a burden. In one of Archer's more nuanced arcs, Giles faces a deeply personal test, one that asks whether the cost of doing what is right can be too high even for the most principled man. His decisions ripple outward, touching not only his public image, but the emotional fabric of his family. His story serves as a mirror to Harry's, two men navigating different kinds of power, each finding that silence and speech carry equal weight. Sebastian Clifton, now a young executive in his own right, begins to shape the company's future with boldness and skill. His confidence is no longer youthful. It has been tempered by betrayal and consequence. Yet, as he steps into positions of greater influence, Archer introduces a shift. Sebastian is no longer simply reacting to danger. He is now a player in his own right. Still, his Achilles heel remains personal: love. As he navigates a romance with Samantha Sullivan, he must balance desire with discretion, ambition with care. His arc, perhaps more than anyone's, captures the tension of a man torn between who he wants to be and who he's expected to become. And lurking still, Don Pedro Martinez. Though weakened, the damage he's already done continues to reverberate. His son Bruno takes on the mantle of villainy with less polish but no less venom. Bruno's attacks are clumsy, yes, but dangerous nonetheless. Archer handles this generational shift with precision. Even as one enemy fades, another rises, each more desperate, less predictable. The novel's tone is a kind of coiled quiet. There are no wide arcs of melodrama here, just the steady layering of detail, the slow, careful drawing of lines that, eventually, must be crossed. The emotional pacing is deliberate, but never dull. Archer makes space for reflection without sacrificing momentum. Characters are allowed to sit with their choices, and in that stillness, the reader is invited to feel the full gravity of what's at stake. By the final chapters, the title proves prophetic. It is not might, not muscle, but truth, written, spoken, lived, that holds the power to undo enemies and free the innocent. And yet, Archer resists simplicity. Even as wrongs are righted, he leaves just enough open threads to remind us. In this world, justice is not a destination but a practice, and one misstep can change the course of generations. Trouble rarely announces itself in "cometh the hour." It slips in quietly, under the guise of progress, opportunity, even love. As Archer continues the Clifton Chronicles, the stakes feel tighter, more intimate, even as the consequences grow ever more public. The novel opens on the back of a scandal, a suicide note that threatens not just reputations, but the integrity of everything the Barringtons and Cliftons have built. And with that, the game shifts once more. Giles Barrington stands at the edge of political ruin. The letter left behind by his former lover, journalist Virginia Fenwick, carries a potential explosion of truth wrapped in personal devastation. What Giles must decide is not just how to weather the scandal, but whether survival is worth the compromise it demands. His character, once led by idealism, now finds itself cornered by realpolitik, and Archer gives him no easy exits. There's dignity in Giles still, but it's been worn thin by years of maneuvering, and it shows. Harry Clifton, meanwhile, pursues the release of Anatoly Babakov with renewed urgency. His role as president of Penn has shifted from diplomatic to dangerous. visiting the Soviet Union, challenging its narrative, and pushing to publish Babakov's forbidden memoir, Uncle Joe, puts Harry in real peril. And yet, his commitment never falters. His storyline is perhaps the most ideologically charged, yet Archer never loses the personal thread. For Harry, truth is not abstract. It's a man behind bars, a voice stifled, a sentence that needs to be heard. This belief becomes his anchor, even as it isolates him from a world less willing to take the same risks. Emma Clifton's presence remains commanding, though quieter in this installment. She represents continuity, a moral and managerial backbone holding the Barrington Empire together while others lurch through crisis. Her steadiness, particularly in the face of new business threats, is a kind of silent resistance. She doesn't need to outmaneuver her enemies loudly. Her strength lies in foresight and restraint, a quality Archer subtly celebrates without overstating it. Sebastian Clifton, now the company's rising star, faces some of the most emotionally layered challenges in the book. His past with Samantha still lingers, but his entanglement with Priya Guman, the brilliant but betrothed Indian businesswoman, adds complexity that Archer handles with delicacy. The romance feels immediate and real, but not without consequence. Priya's loyalty to her family and culture collides with Sebastian's willingness to defy both tradition and business protocol. What emerges is not just a love story, but a meditation on identity, freedom, and cost. In Sebastian, we see a man who wants to build, yet risks becoming the very force that fractures what he loves. Bruno Martinez steps more fully into his role as antagonist, though without the cunning subtlety his father once wielded. His motivations feel more petulant, more reactive, and perhaps that's what makes him dangerous. He's a man born into vengeance, not strategy, and Archer uses that volatility to contrast the careful, patient power plays of the Clifton family. Bruno wants to destroy Sebastian, but lacks the discipline for a long game. His attacks are public, brutal, but increasingly ineffective, until one misstep from Sebastian threatens to undo it all. Through it all, the novel's tone moves between simmering tension and quiet introspection. There are no easy villains here, no untouchable heroes. Even the most noble characters falter, and Archer leans into those moments. Misjudgments are made in silence, away from boardrooms and rallies, often in private moments when the heart speaks louder than sense. That's what gives the story its emotional texture. It never forgets that each headline or courtroom verdict begins with a human choice, often a flawed one. As Cometh the Hour draws to a close, the pieces are in motion for a final reckoning. But Archer doesn't rush it. Instead, he invites the reader to sit in the tension a while longer, to reflect on how ambition and sacrifice have brought every character to this ledge. And with one final breath, we realize, some storms are loud, others are still, but all of them change the landscape when they pass.